we don't win unless people come out to vote. And elections have the consequences that you see today. Because I'm telling you, if the Republicans were in control of Congress, or the House of Representatives, you would not be seeing this horrible, divisive process that's going on to try to remove President Trump from office. And the Democrats will always tell you, the people on the left, they'll always tell you that they're the most educated. They look down on us as being a bunch of rubes, uninformed rubes. But the reality is, conservatives are educated. Democrats are indoctrinated. And that's why we are free-thinking people. That's why we sometimes have divisions amongst ourselves and shoot ourselves in the foot sometimes. But doggone, it's because we believe in our principles and we stand and fight for our principles. And that's really critical. But one thing that we do need is we do need narrative discipline. And we do need unity. Especially because this is an existential crisis that's going on. All this goofy stuff about a constitutional crisis, that's the new talking point, by the way. There's a constitutional crisis. Talking point from the Dems. But the reality is, this is an existential crisis for the United States of America. Because what you are seeing is a coup, a slow-moving coup attempt. And groups like yours, NFRA, and the Freedom Caucus stand together to fight. And if you remember just 3 years ago, I was campaigning. It was my first time to run for Congress. I had not planned on running for Congress. It was the hardest thing I'd done. My wife and I were up every day walking doors in Arizona at 4:30 in the morning. Now you say, unless you're from Arizona, why in the world would you go walking doors at 4:30 in the morning? It's hotter than blue blazes. And so we would go out, and the idea is you should do a lit drop. But we saw more people at 5 a.m. working in their yards or meandering around than you would if you went any other time of the day. Odd. And then we would go until about 11, 12 o'clock at night, and we'd get to do it again. Well, what happens is, as you're doing this, you realize how much the American people want to lead. And one night, my wife and I there was something that fell apart, so it happened to be a debate. And we looked and we saw the 17 Republican candidates for president on the stage. And I turned to my wife about 20 minutes in and I said, hey, one of these things is not like the others. And it was President Trump, of course. And we knew, this group knows, that you had to shake things up in Washington, D.C., right? Yeah. We needed a disruptor. And President Trump said last night in his speech that the night before last, that it is even worse, the swamp is even worse than he thought it was. And if you want to know if your U.S. congressman or congresswoman is part of the problem, go up to them and ask them, is it worse or better than you thought it would be when you were running for Congress? And if they say it was worse, they're part of the solution. If they say it's not as bad, hey, there's some great people, it's not bad, they're part of the problem. They're part of the problem. So we need to make sure that we have narrative discipline. So I'll tell you what I mean by narrative discipline. Right now, there is no one more disqualified than Adam Schiff to lead an inquiry into the President of the United States of America. He is fundamentally the most biased, prevaricating person you can meet. And oddly enough, we should censure him. I have a motion where we should censure him. But the narrative's got to be clear. Everybody you talk to, you need to remind them how disqualified this person is, unqualified. He's unqualified himself by being so totally biased. And Nancy Pelosi has really tried to play this both ends to the middle. Because what she's talking about is she's come out and said we need to have this impeachment inquiry. She's trying to formalize it without formalizing it. So the first narrative point is always Adam Schiff. The second narrative point is the lack of process, how this is not like any other time. It's not like any other time because normally we'd have a vote, it'd be formalized. We would go then at that point set the rules. When you set the rules, that means the president gets to have his attorneys, his counsel there. They get to participate and ask questions. It means that it's an open process, so the American people can see what kind of evidence you're hanging your impeachment hat on. Because they're trying to overthrow the election of the President of the United States. And when you are trying to set aside the election of the President, you better do it by the book, you better have something to hang your hat on, and you better make sure the American public knows why you're doing it. So you must consistently talk about how unfair the process is. You can't close the doors up the way Adam Schiff has. You just can't do it. Republicans need to be able to subpoena witnesses to come testify as well. None of this is happening. The President's counsel's not there. Republicans are being thwarted in their attempts to ask questions. Republicans are not allowed to subpoena witnesses. This is a kangaroo court, and as my good friend Matt Gaetz would say, with a malevolent Captain Kangaroo running the kangaroo court. So it's important to have the discipline. So the third point that you always make about this is you talk about what this means to the American people. So first of all, you have a president that has kept every promise he could possibly keep with a recalcitrant Congress, right? He is the most, and this is the key, he is the most pro-life president in the history of this country. And that is a great, great testament to his willingness to keep his promises. Because I know that when he went and met with an actress named Phyllis Schlafly of the Eagle Forum, he promised to her he would be pro-life. He's kept that promise. And so we talk about that. We talk about the economy. We talk about the unemployment rates for every demographic being the lowest in history. We talk about literally more people working in this country than ever before. We talk about the millions of people who are off food stamps. We talk about the manufacturing jobs that are returning. In my district alone, I have a good friend, in fact, a former client, and hadn't seen him for years, hadn't been a client for years, but he had built 2 factories in Japan, China, and he has about 1,000 people working over there, 2,000, whatever it is. He's bringing 1,000 of those jobs back to the Phoenix metro area. Manufacturing jobs. And we talk about the prestige of the United States throughout the world. So I want to tell you that the president has something that we haven't seen in many, many years. He has a foreign policy strategy. It's a strategy. And the folks that had gone before him didn't have a strategy, they had an apology. And so Mr. Obama, President Obama, would go around apologizing to everyone. And about what? Well, because he believed that America was not a country and never was great. But I'm here to tell you, America is the greatest country in the history of the world. The greatest country in the history of the world. A country that has brought more people prosperity than any other system of government in the world. And President Donald Trump is keeping his promises when he says we're going to bring troops home. That is critical. And I don't want to get too far into the weeds on this, but I want to explain something to you. I understand the Kurds have been helpful. And now I am off my talking points. You need narrative discipline. I'm off my discipline right now. So, but I just wanted to mention this because this just griped me to death, because there are a few things that are very irksome about the way many Republicans and Democrats are criticizing this president, including leadership in the United States House of Representatives on the Republican side and what they're saying. The Kurds are not a nation. They are a group of people. They are people. They're there in some place where they don't have land. They are divided amongst themselves. They are not an ally. An ally is a nation that you have an agreement with. What we have here is people that we have conscripted with, or we've contracted with. These are the PKK, the Marxian wing of the Kurdish people, who before us worked with the Soviets and the Russians, because their purpose is to, their animosity is with the Turks. And when we were told that we would be in Syria for a few weeks or months, and it turns to years, and our young men and young women are injured and hurt, fighting for in a place that we've never, as the United States Congress, declared war nor authorized the use of military force. Do you have a constitutional problem, number one? And secondly, you have to face the fact that you have not defined the national security interest. And that's what this is all about. And the swamp is going berserk because President Trump is trying to keep his promises there. President Trump has worked hard on getting an immigration policy in place, but the United States Congress has thwarted him at every turn. I introduced a piece of legislation before the midterm election that would pay for the border wall. And it would not require general funds. There was a whole series of mechanisms in place that would actually fund the wall, and would fund that wall to the tune of probably $4 or $5 billion a year in perpetuity. So we could build the wall, we could also then maintain the wall, we could also additionally provide the back pay that was swiped under the Obama administration to the Border Patrol agents, provide new material and equipment. And my bill, for those of you who watch this closely, which is everybody in this room, was assigned to 7 committees.
Oh, no.
7 committees. So I went to the speaker and had a nice sit-down conversation. I said, what the heck are you doing assigning this bill to 7 committees? And we went and had this discussion. And he said, Andy, we just can't do anything controversial before the midterm elections or we'll lose. But I said, Mr. Speaker, with all due respect, if you don't do this bill, and you don't provide the president the mechanism to build the wall to keep the campaign promise that he made and everyone in Congress made, we will lose the House. You cannot be afraid of controversy. You have to stand up. You must always be counted. You have to be principled. You have to keep your promises. And that leads us to the House Freedom Caucus. So the Freedom Caucus was formed to represent the voices of the American people who are not being heard in the United States House of Representatives. And we know that that's true because we fight that constantly. And we've not changed. That is still the mission. And the most simple way to do that is to remember the promises you made and keep them. Odd, isn't it? Just how odd. You know what happens if you do that? People trust you. But when you make promises and you don't keep them, they don't trust you. And they don't want to get out and work for you. They don't want to get out and work for your cause because it becomes apparent you don't really have a cause. So, I don't understand why so many of my colleagues find it odd that the Freedom Caucus has reached a point where we have leverage in the conference out of sheer numbers that we have. and it's out of principle. But we've reached the national stage, and so Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows, two mentors and heroes of mine, have lifted the Freedom Caucus up to a national stage, an opportunity to speak on the national stage. And the reality is, it's because we do everything we possibly can to keep every promise we make. And that's part of the narrative discipline that I would urge you to have. Okay, so, the Freedom Caucus, what are we doing now? So you heard from Jody, I guess, and you heard from Jody Heiss again this evening. He's a dynamic speaker. He is great, and he's working on communications for the Freedom Caucus. Warren Davison from Ohio is working on policy. And what we need to do at this critical juncture in the history of the United States is the Freedom Caucus is doing some things a little bit differently than we had. So I've instituted a daily digest. And I can't remember what we call it, because we've only had it for a week, because I've only been on the job for a week. But every day we're putting out everything that the Freedom Caucus members are saying, everything that we can link to from coalitions that we're building to provide talking points with substantive narrative to follow so people know what the real issues regarding this impeachment is. We need to know that. So that's out there. And we are trying to form the coalitions that we can send it. So the Freedom Caucus, each one of us has our groups, our social media, and this is how you can do it too. And so we then, with the Freedom Caucus, we're working with different coalitions and saying, I know you've got 3 million people on your email list. Maybe there's overlap, maybe there's not. But we're going to provide you with this daily digest and we ask you to send it out. Because you have to magnify the message. It isn't nearly enough that we have a narrative, that we are disciplined in communicating the narrative. You actually have to communicate the narrative as broadly and widely as you can. And as you do that, you build allies. You turn the tide, because I'm telling you this is exactly what the Democrats do. And the reason I know is I have the notes from their meeting where they met and coordinated, which is not the right word. You can't coordinate. I have the minutes of that meeting, and I've read it. We seek cooperative coalitions, and that's what we do with the Freedom Caucus. And now, why do we do this? Because of who we are. The Declaration of Independence was unique. It is the foundation for what we believe. We believe that all men and women are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with unalienable rights. We don't believe that those rights come from the government. We believe those rights come from God. That makes us different today than the Democrats of today. It makes us different than some Republicans, but it makes us different certainly from the other side. The edifice built on that foundation was the Constitution. The Constitution's purpose is to actually protect and preserve those God-given rights. And so we diffuse power in a way that had never been diffused before in the history of the world. You've got a separation of powers, and I want to disabuse you. You don't have 3 co-equal branches governing. You have 3 unequal branches that have a different function. The legislative branch was meant to be and understood to be by the founders to be the most powerful branch because it creates the laws. The executive branch was meant to be weaker because you don't want your enforcers to be overly powerful. And your last branch, the judiciary, was meant to be the weakest branch.
Yeah.
And all of the power and authority to govern in and of itself came from whom?
God.
The people of the United States of America, represented through states. So you have the horizontal separation, and you also have the vertical separation that Madison talks about. That separation was meant to be state power versus federal power. State power versus the centralized government. We no longer have a federated system, we have a national system of government. We are upside down. All the power is now pointing on the individual's head. Government's power is usurping the individual authority and the responsibility, and you see it in the reflection of consistent expansion of government authority. We do what we do in the Freedom Caucus and what you do in FRA because we have to restore the proper balance of government so we can protect the freedoms that God gave us. And in so doing, we will have a peaceful, prosperous future for us and our children and grandchildren. I love what you do. Please get out and work. I'm asking people who work to get out and work. Recruit people to get out and help you. Expand and magnify what you do. We will win this election. And may God bless you. God bless you.